In this episode of GLF Podcast, I got to interview a true industry veteran, Steve Riley of Atticus. Started practicing law in the late 80s, built a substantial PI law firm, got bored, transitioned to estate planning law firm, built it up, sold it, and decided to dedicate his life to helping other law firm owners build great practices and lives that they absolutely love. Tune into this podcast episode, listen to Steve about his journey and the practical ideas that you can implement in your law firms to build a better business and enjoy a better life. Hi there. I have a small but really meaningful favor to ask you. I watch at the stats on our YouTube channel and Spotify channel, wherever most people listen and watch our podcast. And I see that over 80% of everybody who listens to it regularly is not a subscriber. I'm asking you to subscribe to this channel. And the reason for that is my mission and the mission of my team is to help as many small law firm owners to learn how to transform their law firms into better businesses, and so they in turn enjoy better lives. When you hit subscribe button, you tell these platforms that this is content worth listening, worth viewing, and they in turn will show it to many other small law firm owners and hopefully help me fulfill our mission of helping them create a better business and enjoy better lives. So would you please do me this favor? It would mean the world to me, and hit the subscribe button. And my promise to you is that I will continue to work hard at creating good content with practical ideas that help you and your teams grow better law firms. Thank you. Welcome to another amazing podcast episode. I have a tremendous guest with me here today, Steve Riley of Atticus Consulting Group that helps lawyers build amazing law practices and build a life that they love. Steve,
Thank you,
welcome to the
Sasha.
show.
Thank you, Sasha. I appreciate it. And really great to be here. I know it took a while to coordinate all this, but thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And I look forward to being part of your podcast. So thank you.
Absolutely. We've met at one of the summits where we've been attending. My group's been attending your summits for the last 3 years, I want to say. And it is our favorite event to go to every single year. We meet a lot of amazing people there from Atticus and your clients. And I just want to congratulate you and Mark, the founder of the law firm, and all of your partners and all of your advisors on such a tremendous success, because every year we go, we see a lot of same faces that come there year after year, and they tell us how much they love being there. And this is one of the reasons why we keep on coming back.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We've built it. So we've nicknamed it, we call it the Atticus Family Reunion. We call everybody the Atticousins because we have so many members that come back to it. So it's one of our favorite things to do. We're been honored next to Clio. Clio's ranked us as the second best law firm conference to attend for solo and small firm attorneys. Of course, Clio's ranked themselves number one. So let's be clear about that, right? Of course. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. So thank you. I appreciate it. And we love having you there. And it's a great event.
Truly is. So your journey in law started in 1988 when you were first barred, and you've been practicing law first as a trial attorney for about a decade. Then
That's
you
correct.
switched to estate planning for about a decade.
That's
and
true.
Now you've been a certified practice advisor for yet another decade.
Yes, sir. That's true. It's a strange long journey, but I spent the first decade of my career as a trial lawyer, and I started with a firm that did litigation, was offered partnership at the end of my second year, declined the partnership, and ended up opening up my own shop, which was crazy. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I didn't want to be there anymore, and opened up a firm and just kind of hung up a shingle and started practicing, and was very fortunate getting some really good cases in, some really good clients. My focus then was really going to court, just being a good litigator, doing jury trials, bench trials. And I did that for a good decade. And I think somewhere, I don't know, I think I probably had about 100 trials under my belt, and somewhere between 12 to 14, 10 to 12 years, I just got to a point where I was getting burned out. And I had about 4 associates at that point in time and about 14 to 16 staff. We were doing a lot of personal injury work, and I just kind of didn't want to do that anymore. I just didn't want to do that anymore. And so I started looking around at other practice areas, and I started analyzing the different types of practices. And then I ended up deciding to go into estate planning and elder law with a little kick of corporate, and completely pivoted my practice and started a whole different practice in a different domain. And it's unusual. Very few lawyers will make that kind of a transition. And I've taken the position that the law is not very hard. It's really not. It's the running of the law practice that's hard, and that's usually prohibits a lot of lawyers from growing. And that's why your company and your role is so important to me, is supporting lawyers in the growth of the practice, growing their firms. So when I pivoted again, I grew very quickly, and funny enough, I got to about 5 associates, and about 14 to 16 staff, and got frustrated again and realized it wasn't the practice area that was making me crazy. It was my inability to manage about that many people. And what I discovered was I hit what I now understand to be the span of management. Like, most lawyers can only manage so many people. That's why so many solo small firms are like 4 to 6 staff. They can't manage beyond those people. This is one of the reasons our team leader certification program is so important to me, is that to actually scale a firm, you have to have a management infrastructure. You have to have some form of infrastructure that allows you, the lawyer, to do what you do best, which is do your work and bring in business. And you got to have a really good management infrastructure. What I discovered when I was both times, from growing the plaintiff's practice and the estate planning elder law practice, was that I kind of hit the ceiling of growth because I didn't know how to manage more people. And that's how I ended up getting introduced to Atticus. I hired Atticus probably 4 or 5 years into that process, and my now partner became my coach to help me coach through and think through some of the business issues of the practice. Our tagline is really, grow great practice and cultivate a great life. But at the time, I wasn't having a great life, and I had to really rethink through how to build a life that worked for me, that supported my practice, not where my life was really there to serve the practice. I needed to flip the whole thing, and Mark was instrumental in that. So when I sold the practice, and I think it was 2010, 2011, I sold the practice, and I didn't sell the practice because I needed to or I got bored with it. And the short version is, my mom had developed Alzheimer's, and my father is a retired FBI agent, and he was a SWAT team commander. And if you look up nurturing in the dictionary, if you look up, he's not a nurturing guy, man. You're just not. He's not nurturing. So they lived about 3 hours away from me. So I practiced in Tampa, and they lived in a little town called Ormond Beach, which is north of Daytona Beach. And it was just tough. It was just tough. So my wife, who is just a remarkable woman, told me that, we say that families are true north. And she's like, your folks need us. And so we literally bought a home 3 doors down from my folks, rehabbed it, and my wife and kids moved in there. And then I sold the practice and moved to, down the road from my folks to support my mom and try and keep her home as long as possible. So that was the play, that was a play. And my wife said this brilliant thing to me. She goes, if you're as good as this, she said, if you're as good as I think you are at this, you starting another practice or you starting another business won't be a problem. You'll figure it out. You'll do something. And funny enough, that's how I ended up here with Atticus. I was talking to Mark at the time. He wasn't my partner. He was my friend. And he persuaded me to come on board to take some of the 20 plus years experience I had of growing 2 different practice areas and sharing that with other lawyers, coaching and advising them on how to grow their practices. So we really work more on the business skill side, not necessarily what you do, but more like, everything from mindset to how to shift the business skills, how to think about focus management, time management, how to think about, client development, how to think about building and growing a great team, how to understand cash flow and profitability, some of those core business skills that no lawyer's ever taught. So we're working with law firms that are starting out, one person off the kitchen table, to law firms that have hundreds of employees that are very, very well run. So we've seen the gamut, and pretty much in North America. So about 600 law firms right now that the company's working with. We have 35 advisors, and we have group programs. So we also have lawyers come to group programs. So there's a lot of different ways that we try and support lawyers in their growth. But, long answer to your short question was, it's been a very interesting journey, and it's been a very fun journey and a very fulfilling journey for me, because I really When I first started being a lawyer, I didn't like other lawyers. I really just didn't get along with them. I didn't fit in with them. I worked 2 jobs to get through law school, so I just wasn't really like part of the in crowd. But when I opened up my own practice and started growing, I started developing some great relationships with other lawyers that were very supportive. And, I consider them my brothers and sisters of the bar, trying to support each other and having a great practice and great life. So I'm, I'm a real big fan of supporting lawyers and growing whatever practice they want, as long as it serves their life the way they want. I have no preconceived it must be this way kind of notion, which I did when I was younger. I was pretty tight about what it should look like and how it should work. Now, not so much. I don't know if that makes sense to you, Sasha, but
Oh, it
it's
makes perfect
okay.
sense. The young idealism, it runs in so many of us. Steve, remarkable story. So 4 or 5 years into your second law practice, you said that you ran into certain issues, and it sounded like it was managing the managers or getting the managers in the right places, which we didn't, which create a lot of friction in your law firm at the time. And this is how you decided to go with Atticus, right?
Right. We
That
grew
was the
very
main issue.
quickly.
Hmm.
We grew, the law firm grew very, very quickly. When I went to the estate planning elder law field, what I did is I studied carefully. I interviewed about 100 lawyers that were in the estate planning and elder law field, and I interviewed them and asked them, what was working about their practices, what wasn't working about their practice, what was the number one thing that they adopted as a strategy to grow their practice. I learned about how they operated their practices. I learned about their case management systems. I learned about their document assembly programs. I talked to over 100 lawyers about how they operated. And I basically created for lack of a better word, like an operation manual of best practices. So when I did decide to transition from personal injury to the estate planning, I took my 3 best employees and I took one attorney with me, and of course myself. And then I basically referred out all the cases except for 100 really good cases, and then refocused the firm on the estate planning elder law side, predominantly estate planning. And I had all these lawyers that just basically told me, hey, this is how it worked when I grew my practice. Here's the stupidest thing I ever did, and don't do this. Here's, the best document assembly program I use. So I kind of had a lot of really quick advice. So when I hit the ground, I hit the ground running and leveraged that insights, like the strategies I learned from other lawyers, and hit the ground running. And within about 2 years, it took me about a good 2 years to explode the firm. And at the time, I did it mainly off of referrals. So I just really focused tremendously on building a referral based practice. And I know this sounds crazy, but uh, most lawyers, I always joked I went to law school to avoid 2 things: people and math. And I didn't want to learn sales. I didn't want to learn marketing. And most lawyers don't want to learn sales. They don't want to learn marketing. So the first thing I had to learn when I grew the estate planning practice was sales and marketing, right? so, so, and so, and what was great, because most of the lawyers in that space in Tampa didn't want to do sales and they didn't want to do marketing. And the more I did it, the more I realized what a huge advantage this is to, just a huge advantage. It's just an incredible advantage to go out there and develop referral relationships, go out there and, and I'm introvert. Like if anybody, you've seen me at conferences and stuff, I look like I'm an extrovert, but I'm a practice extrovert. If I got my choice, I'm not going to go to some social thing. I hated them, but I loved one-on-one meetings, like a
Hmm.
conversation with you like this one-on-one. Awesome. Put me in a group of 50 people. Awful. But I learned how to develop referral relationships. I learned how to ask for business ethically, authentically, comfortably. I learned how to say thank you. I learned how to refer work to people I respected. And I built a really intentional referral based practice that had everything from a good top of mind awareness system that we kept in touch with our referral sources, did educational workshops for our referral sources. So it was very, very focused. And what I realized is I could outmarket my management infrastructure. And this is where most lawyers get in trouble. Once we learn to market and we like to market and we like to grow, where we get in trouble is the management infrastructure of how to scale. And what does the infrastructure look like to scale? And that's where I hit the wall. That's where my revenues flattened out a little bit. And I really learned, and one of my taglines with all of our clients is you have to build capacity to get revenue. So capacity drives growth. You have to build the capacity. And everybody wants to build the capacity after they get the revenue. It doesn't work that way. You got to build the capacity, build for the capacity, hire the people, train the people, then market into those people to generate the revenue. And this is the thing that I had to learn. And I quickly realized from a marketing perspective, as long as I had the people in the processes, I could grow and scale comfortably. And that was the challenge I think a lot of lawyers don't really appreciate. They just don't appreciate. They're just like, okay, I've marketed. And this is where you see the cash flow problems going up and down, right? Because they market, they get really busy, then they got to do the work. They do the work, they don't market. and then suddenly they have, cash flow problems because they don't have enough work to do. And so you really have to learn how to do this consistently and perform consistently and keep that marketing machine going, whatever that may look like for you. And at the same time, understand that your biggest job after marketing is finding, recruiting, training, managing, and leading great people. And that becomes, this from the size of your organization. This is, you and I are talking offline, the different businesses that you had before, but the growth and the scale really comes from that secret of trying to find great people. So I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Wonderful insights there. I find that attorneys, most other specialists, are trained to be good specialists. And then we think that I can do this on my own, start our own thing. Yet we're still specialists. We're not business people yet. And we try to grow through trials and tribulations. And we get okay, not very good, but most of us get okay at hiring other specialists and training some of them the things that we know. And other specialists that need to do things that we do not know, we hope that they know how to do those things, but we don't know how to manage them because we don't know exactly what it is that they do, which creates a layer of complexity because you know that you want things done, but you don't know how to do them the right way. So you rely on these people, and most people will do things the way that they want to do because you're not a specialist in what they do. So what you hope to do is at some point you just go like, this is driving me crazy. I need to hire someone who is going to manage these people. But whereas most specialists who become business owners are not very good or okay-ish at hiring specialists, most specialists are terrible at hiring managers.
Absolutely.
Really terrible at hiring managers.
Absolutely.
And this is where the capacity problems happen, right? Because you can effectively manage maybe 6 people, maybe 8 people, if you know what they're doing.
Exactly.
If you don't know what it's just being a business owner, an executive of a small business, a large business, is very, very hard. So I assume that Atticus, in part, teaches this, how to bring in and manage managers.
We do. There's 2 responses. First off, there's the paradox of the lawyers try to manage the stuff that the people do. They don't try to manage the people. And so you have to realize that instead of managing the cases and the cases that the people do, you have to actually manage the people and quit worrying about how to manage the cases. So you have to shift. You have to let go of how they're doing the cases. And that's part of your process. You got to be really clear how the process works. And as long as they perform according to the process, that's great. And then you manage the people inside the process. And a lot of lawyers don't get that. They keep trying to manage the cases and trying to manage the cases through the people and not manage the people and let the people manage the cases. It's a really funny thing, and I see it all the time. The second thing is it's one of the things that we started probably 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe 6 years ago, is that we started what we call the team leader training program. So if you're part of our membership, and I'll get you a link for it, but basically if you're a law firm, you're trying to train up your people to be good managers, you have to figure out how to do that. And you don't have the time. So we've created a course that's basically a virtual course to teach them. It's 3 levels, but it's level 1, level 2, level 3. We take someone who's a really trusted employee inside a law firm and teach them how to be a manager. And it takes, basically 3 stages to training them, but you go through one stage and see how their skills work. Then you take them to the next stage. Then you take them to the third stage. So we've gotten to a point and we've got probably 175 to 200 people have graduated out of that program so far. And at this point, I just tell the lawyers that are members, like, look, if you want to grow and you want to grow quickly, don't try and train up your manager because you don't know what you're doing. You're a terrible manager as it is. I mean, I'm a terrible manager. I'm good at wreaking havoc, but we have a great CEO. We have some people that are so much better than I am at this management stuff. And anybody that I'm on teams with will tell you I'm a terrible manager. I'm just a terrible manager. Good leader, but terrible manager.
Explain the difference
Most
between
of
those two.
Yeah, yeah. So most lawyers I know are terrible managers, great in the courtroom, great with clients. So you have to figure out, if you can't train somebody up to be a manager because you're terrible at it. So you need to find a solution to train these people to be better managers. Otherwise, you're going to cap out. Your revenue is going to cap out. And the only thing you can do is raise prices or get better cases. And that's basically where your margins increase over time. But you're still going to be working like a dog. And that's
Experience a
part
lot
of
of
the problem.
stress.
Yeah, it's too
So
much work.
super interesting. You mentioned that you're a great leader, but a terrible manager. Explain what the difference is between a leader and a manager.
Well, it's a good question. And it's one that you and I could probably debate, but I'll give you my short answer. A great leader sets direction and vision. A great manager helps you execute on the direction and vision. And a great manager is going to help the people that are on your team understand the direction and vision, develop KPIs, performance metrics, key performance indicators, and help them perform as you go towards that vision. So for you and I, we're more leaders than we are managers. We can say, okay, here's where I want to go. And then we got to make sure we have people on our team that understand how to help us get there. And that really, for me, is probably the simplest direction. Most lawyers I know are rarely do you see great managers. Rarely do you see great managers as lawyers because it's not the skill set. It's not their skill set. What do you think? What do
So,
you what do you think the difference is?
so I think you put it very well. I do both. I have a leadership role, I have a management role, and I have a specialist role in my sizable company. So I wear multiple hats. I have a leadership role as my partner, and I wear the co-CEOs of the business. So it's before we started recording, I mentioned that we do an annual offsite retreat, and we have a large team, and we get together. Every year I tell people that I love my business more this year than I did the year before. It's a great business, and we have incredibly high retention. And as I said, at this last retreat, just last weekend, we had a hot seat where employees would put, like, every one of us went through a hot seat, and people would like tell good things and things to work on. And they grilled my partner and I, and I said that my partner is like, it's like marriage, and this wife I have no conflicts with whatsoever. We rarely have conflict. I should have referred to him as a spouse, but it was after a couple of beers for sure. We have a great relationship with my partner. 99% of the time we see things eye to eye. So we're amazing co-CEOs, which I know is very rare for most businesses. That's why I had to like put that little disclaimer there that we are co-CEOs, which is super rare. So we're, as leaders, we set direction. We also, my partner's incredibly kind, incredibly warm person. So other good people gravitate toward him. I'm more of a hard ass, and I'm very open about it. I'm all about KPIs and process and everything else. And Ivan is just a really nice guy. And he's also very systematic, but he's also really nice. So he attracts a lot of really nice people, which also is, I think it's a must for at least one of the leaders within the company to be that, which is what he is. And so, in addition to that, I manage two departments within the company. I manage our small sales team, and I manage our corporate marketing team. Both are small teams, but I manage both of them day to day, meaning 5 days a week. I meet with my specialists 5 days a week without a fail. Those meetings can be as short as 15 minutes or as long as an hour, 2 hours per day, but it's practically every day. And in addition to this, I create content. So this is my specialist role. So right now, this is me being a specialist creating content for the company. So These are very different roles, require very different skill sets, and I love all three of them. I never thought about like how I differentiate between them as far as what's the difference between leader and the manager, although it's very clear in my management roles for two departments. I manage different systems, different people with different key leading indicators, with different key performance indicators. And the reason why I can do it fairly effectively, I've been operating businesses since December of 2001. And we're recording this since January 2025. It's been good 24 years. I know what I'm doing. I've been through different schools of hard knocks, many different schools of hard knocks. I told you I've had three businesses prior to that, some good, some really bad. So I learned, and I'm pretty good with people. I learned how to be good with people. Although one of the feedbacks that I got at this most recent retreat, which is again just days ago, some of the employees said that they wished I didn't communicate quite as directly as I did. because I do that, and I feel that it's the best way to communicate. Like, look, I have, and they hate this reference, but I tell them I have three kids. One is 17, another one is 14, another one just turned 10 months old. I communicate with the 17-year-old, the 14-year-old, and the 10-month-old very differently. I'm like, guys, you're adults. I will tell you exactly how it is. I will not mince words. And the reason why I do that, I'm very short on time.
Yeah,
And I
totally get
know
it.
that you're very capable of hearing exactly what I have on my mind. I will never offend you personally, but if you did a shit job, I will tell you so.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. And I will tell you like how to do this differently if I am in a position to tell you how to do it differently, because I manage some specialists that I really do not know what it is that they do technically. I just don't. And that's okay. Like
Yeah.
I understand it at the 50,000 foot level. So thanks for turning it back on me. And yeah, so this is the difference
Well,
between leadership, management, and specialists. And by the way, so I want to expand a little bit on what you said, because a lot of attorneys who watch this podcast and listen to this podcast and read the show notes may not understand the difference between different management levels. So if you're operating a very small law firm, let's say you're under a billion in gross revenue, chances are you have no managers but yourself.
agreed. Yeah,
If you're
agreed.
operating a $5 million law firm, chances are you cannot do it without having at least another manager or two. That would
Oh,
be
no, no, no. There's no way. There's
incredibly
no way.
difficult.
Depending on
And
the nature of the firm, depending on the nature of the firm, depending on the practice. So you could, if you're a med mal specialist and your average fee per case might be, half a million to $1 million.
okay, that's
$5 million firm
that's an
with somebody
exception then.
like that
Sure.
might have two or three support
Yeah.
associates, three or four staff, and maybe a right hand person. No big deal. But if you're an estate planning firm or family law firm, and your average fee per case, let's say estate planning firm might be $5,000 per case, and family law firm, let's say, might be $35,000 per case. You are going to have a sophisticated management structure to manage the volume, manage the intake, manage the quality control, manage customer expectations, client expectations. I mean, there's some work there. And I have quite a few clients that are in that range for estate planning. They all make good seven figures in income, but and I fight with them. I fight with them. You have to invest more into management infrastructure. You need more managers. I want to see one or two project managers. I want to see a couple of case managers, but I like to see 2 to 3 team leaders managing different profit centers. So depending on the nature of the practice, you might have 2 to 3 different profit centers, and you have a team leader or manager of those profit centers that should be reporting to either another team lead or the lawyer themselves. I prefer another team lead.
Yeah.
The lawyers by default will try and make another lawyer a manager. And I don't like lawyers as manager just for the same reason I said before. We're not trained as managers, and we're very expensive managers. It's like taking a brain surgeon and making them a manager. You don't want a brain surgeon. One of my friends is the head of he's a neurosurgeon. He's the head of neurosurgery for a trauma 2 surgical center. He's one of the chairs for University of Florida, and he's a neurosurgeon. I don't want him managing the department. You know what I mean? He's got a department manager, a practice manager, and he's managing 6 neurosurgeons at least at the trauma center, and they're managing them not so much from what their production is, but managing them from the skills. Like, okay, what can I do to help you with this procedure? I feel the same thing way about lawyers. And lawyers, sometimes their gut reaction is to take a good associate who's got some management skills and make them, quote, a managing partner. And I think it's typically, I can't say always, but typically it's a mistake because you're taking a thoroughbred and hooking them to a wagon, unless they are by nature not a thoroughbred. They're, a plow horse. We got to be very, very clear about the skill set of people. So I don't know if that helps.
It definitely does. And by the way, I have made this mistake a few times in my life, and I had to reverse the decision down the road after learning that a good specialist does not necessarily make a good manager.
Yep,
Just as a good manager often will not make a good specialist.
exactly.
It's just it. And then if we take it up a level and we go from $5 million to 10, 15, 20 million in revenue or above that, you have to have management layers. You're
Oh
going to have
yeah,
specialists reporting to manager level one, and then manager level ones will report to manager level two. You will just have a few manager level ones who will be managed by manager level two. But
yes,
it's hard to envision that when you're operating $1 million law firm or $2 million law firm and you wear multiple hats. For those who are running smaller law firms, $1 million or less in annual revenue, I think it's hard to envision that type of management structure. But I also find it very interesting that those who start thinking about their business as a number of, I call them revenue impact zones or RITs. You have your marketing that puts a promise out there. You have your intake, the rest of the world calls it sales, convert some of those prospects that come because they heard the promise somewhere. Now they become your paying clients. You have your operations or production that delivers the service that was promised by sales or intake and marketing. Then you have your HR that makes sure that you have all the right people in the right places, doing the right things at the right times without you constantly telling them to do so. And finally, you have leadership that sets the vision, make sure there are plans. And when they think about those five routes, I think that at a certain point, you need to have a lieutenant for each one of those revenue impact zones. And if you don't, it's at your own peril. Your business will either grow lump-sided because something is functioning better than other, or it will stagnate because you don't have the lieutenants in the right places. And I think this is what you talked about a few minutes ago,
yeah,
the capacity to grow.
yeah. You nailed it because otherwise, by default, you become the manager, and that the owner doesn't understand that by default they become the manager. And you said something. So when I'm talking to lawyers about growth, I kind of use, you got a 10-month-old, you got kids. So I'm going to use Legos, the Lego toys like Lego bricks. If you're looking to scale up a law firm, you want to think, well, and I'm working with a firm right now. They've got firms out in New York, and they got a couple of different offices, and they do billable. It's a billable hour shop. And I'm like, well, your average revenue per attorney is, let's just say, $600,000. So you have lawyers that are producing 600 grand a year, and they're like, well, we'd like to double our revenue. Okay, great. Well, you're a billable hour shop. Your average lawyer does 600 grand a year, so you want to double your revenue. Let's how many more lawyers do you need to double? Right. So let's figure out how many lawyers you got, where we're at. And so you basically have to double the amount of lawyers that you have. To double the amount of lawyers that you have, that's no big deal. Like, you guys got to find them, you got to recruit them, you got to adjust your comp system, you got to have a darn good training program because you cobbled together the Legos now. But if you're going to double and your average lawyer is producing 600 grand per revenue in revenue, then we know that we're going to, let's just say right now we have 12 lawyers doing that. So if we want to go to a double number, then we need 24. So to get to 24 lawyers, that's 600 grand per. What do we have to do from a management perspective? Don't worry about the marketing right now because you guys are getting more work you know what to do with. Let's talk about what it takes to train 12 more lawyers, where we're going to find 12 more lawyers, where we're going to do this. And for them, it's hard for them to actually, it's great to say, I want to double my revenue. And I've been teaching a workshop for 20 years, teaching lawyers how to double their revenue. But it's really pretty basic when you're a billable hour shop or a fixed fee shop. And it gets a little slippery when you're a contingency fee shop. So kind of back into it, and that's where I usually do with lawyers. Like, let's back into it. How much are you doing now? How much of that's you? How much of that is other people? And if we're going to double or quadruple, let's just Lego land it. Let's take this Lego brick, one profit center, increase it for another profit center. So if we're going to triple, We've got a guy doing 600 grand a year in billable work and he wants to triple, then, it's pretty easy. We get 3 more producers and you got to figure out how you're going to handle the work, what it's going to look like, what our rates are. And then it's one of the things we teach the lawyers. We call it rules, rates, utilization, leverage, expense, and speed when it comes to a billable hour shop, understanding how the rules impact your management structure, your pricing structure, how the workflow works. So it's easier for lawyers at this point in time, I think, because of technology, to scale quicker, because the case management systems today, the technology today, the ability to be transparent today with how case flow works and how things process is so much better than it was 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. So I think the ability to scale up and also use global employees is easier now than it's ever been. So I think you can scale very, very quickly. And, working with companies like yours, you can market very, very quickly. I think where lawyers get scared is feeling out of control on the management side and not understanding how to manage the growth, how to manage this. And for one of the funny things, I know it's just going to sound goofy, but this workshop, and, we don't teach it that much anymore. We used to do it once or twice a year, called Double Your Revenue. And the 2 complaints we get from lawyers on not going is like, look, they usually say the 2 things. They're like, number 1, I don't want to double my revenue, because if I've got twice as many of these clients that I currently have, I will shoot myself. Like, I want nothing to do with this. And I don't want to work twice as much. And so they heard it as twice as many bad clients and working twice as much. And that's how they heard it. And to actually grow, and I know this, but for the audience, to actually grow, one of the most important things you've got to be able to do is tighten the intake and choose your clients much more carefully and be very, very clear that not everybody gets in the door. And you may be letting everybody in the door because you need to pay the rent law, you need to pay the rent. But learning how to tighten your intake, only take A+ cases, and how to only request A+ cases is probably the first 2 basic strategies for scaling up a law firm. What's a great client look like? What's a great price for a great client look like? How do you get great clients in the door? Becomes probably the 2 basic skills. And if you learn those 2 skills, you can make a terrific living as a lawyer, whether you're good or not. If you get great cases, there's a lot of lawyers that I know that aren't really that good. They just get some really great cases. And if you do PI law, you get great liability, great damages. You don't have to be an amazing trial lawyer because someone's going to write you a check for the case. So same thing with some of the family law cases, So sometimes what looks like to be a really extraordinary lawyer is usually a really extraordinary marketer that's great at getting great cases and really, really good at pricing those cases and understanding those cases and processing those cases. I think that was my strength as a lawyer. And you were talking about it earlier. I don't have to think as a lawyer you have to be that much better than your competitors. My rule of thumb is if you can be 10% better than your competitors or 20% better than your competitors, you're going to own the market. If you're just 20% better over a period of 3 to 5 years, you're just going to own the market. If your customer service is better, you learn how to return phone calls better, your website's easier to work with, people can read it and understand it, your pricing is clear and understanding depending on the type of law you do. You say thank you, you say please, you ask for referrals, you refer work out. You do that consistently and you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. It just over time it seems to have a compound interest effect. It just seems to build up. So you don't have to be extraordinary. You just have to be above average, which is not hard to do in the legal industry anymore.
Yeah, the bar is set pretty low. I want to repeat what you just said a couple minutes ago because it's so important. I think to most law firm owners, practicing specialists, the thought of doubling the business sounds terrifying. Terrifying, right?
Yeah.
We did not practice this. We both said terrifying at the same time.
Yep, terrifying.
Because exactly what you said. It sounds like I will have to work twice as hard, twice as many hours, which are not even available. And my life is going to be at least twice as difficult.
Yeah, my life sucks now. You want me to be twice as sucky as it is?
Twice as sucky. But the truth of the matter is, every time my business doubled, I worked a little bit less. Every time it would double, I worked a little bit less, to the point where you just want to work yourself out of most of the jobs and get to the point. I had Greg Ward on this podcast 2 months ago. The guy he settled $250 million in cases in 2023. This was like late 2024 when we talked. And I asked him, we went over his org chart. And I'm like, what do you do? He said, I'm responsible for one thing, which is leadership. So at $83 million, he has one job. It's a part-time job. He's not there 40 hours a week. He's in charge of leadership. In fact, he now lives in Miami most of the time. He walks the beach and he thinks about work. He's not actively on calls. He's not returning emails. He thinks about the business, thinking about his next big move. Now he has 3 states. Now he's thinking about the 4th state. That's part of leadership work. But when he was starting out 12 years ago as a specialist, 13 years now, his life was a lot more difficult. But now he has hundreds of employees and his life is a lot simpler. So it's not going, I always think about it this way. Look at competitors. Do you have a competitor that's 10 times larger than you are? You do. Do they work 10 times as many hours? It's impossible. There are no 400 hours in a week. Are they 10 times smarter than you are? Also impossible. Do they have 10 times more experience? Not possible. What do they do better? They have better systems and better people, probably.
I think you make an excellent point, a really good point.
Yeah. Steve, you've done this for so many years, and you've coached dozens and dozens, possibly hundreds of law firm owners over the years, and you've met thousands and thousands and thousands. Your annual event, the summit, which my team attends every year, there are 300-400 law firm owners there. Your slogan is great practice, great life. And this is what you work on with your clients. All these years of experience, hundreds or thousands of connections, what's the difference between those who actually build a great practice and a life that they love versus everybody else? Because we know there are a lot of frustrated, tired, overworked, overstressed, poor earning attorneys out there. And that's probably more of the norm than those who actually love the business that they own and love the life that they built because of the business that they own. What's the main difference? Is it mindset? Is it actions that they take? Both?
No, this is a great question, and thanks for asking it, because it's a really big question. The trick to growing a great practice is actually trying to grow and cultivate and live a great life first. And it comes from an old quote from a German philosopher named Nietzsche. And Nietzsche says, a man with a strong enough why can go through any how. Mm-hmm. And most lawyers are very comfortable working in a miserable practice, working many hours because they have nothing better to do. And I've always joked that if you think of the movie Batman and the comics Batman, Gotham created Batman. And so Gotham created Batman as a hero. Batman came to save Gotham, right? Most lawyers come to their law practices as Batman, as a hero, and then they create Gotham. And inside most law practices, the lawyers are acting like heroes. They're the hero of the story. They're the hero of the law firm. They are the hero. And they get a tremendous amount of emotional validation. And they forget that the real hero is actually probably the client. And if you really want to pivot your firm, make the client the hero, not you. And most lawyers get sucked into this heroic mindset of being the hero of their law firm, where only they can do certain things. So they can never scale beyond a certain point. So the trick that we've developed with lawyers is to challenge them to take time off. No emails, no phone calls, no calls to the office. And we challenge them when they start with us in our group programs to 2 weeks off. Upper level programs, we get them up to 175 days off a year. I just came back from a 5-week vacation, no emails, no phone calls, nothing, because I want to live the way I advise. And the big shift for a lot of lawyers, if you're going to take 5 weeks off. When I was practicing, I took 8 weeks off typically. If you want to take that time period off, it's like you can't. You have to solve certain things inside the firm. You've got to solve intake. You got to solve cash flow management. You got to solve customer service work. You have to build a firm that's not dependent on you. So we love to encourage lawyers to live a really remarkable life so they have something interesting to do outside the practice, especially when it comes to selling their practice. I've helped about 50 law firms build and sell their practices. The largest was probably 380 employees, about 35 lawyers. That was probably the biggest, and then I've had people that them, 5 or 6 staff, and we find a successor and we sell that. So you have two extremes. So the thing, though, for a lawyer to sell their firm and not die at the desk is they have to have something more interesting to do outside the practice than the practice. And most lawyers that practice law who are really, really good are extremely boring human beings. Like if you hang out with them for any period of time, you're like, oh, dear Lord, are we going to talk about this? Are we going to talk about that? They're pretty boring. And the only thing they can talk to you about is war stories from, how I had this one case, I had this crazy client. It's like they want to talk about battle scars. And you're like, you don't want to say it to them, but you're like, I always joke that lawyers can only tolerate so much joy. Like there's an ethical rule that we can't have fun in our lives, an ethical conundrum. Like I'm happy, therefore I must be violating a rule. So the biggest push that we try, and it's a flip. If we focus lawyers on how to grow, they do good. But if we teach lawyers how to cultivate a great life, they build extraordinary practices quickly because they're happy, they're joyful, they're experiencing a life at a different experience. And what we're teaching them is to go contrary to what the average lawyers do. So most of my personal clients, I talked about this before, they come in probably about mid-pack, like 50%, and we get them to 1% pretty quickly. And sometimes 3 to 5 years, depending on how quickly they can grow, what their mindset is, how open they are. But they have to be in a position where they have to be open to cultivate. And the word is cultivate, because you have to learn. You have to learn how to weed the garden. Like, wow, geez, and I've told this story before. So the ironic thing is most lawyers forget how to have a great time outside the practice. And they'll say, but I love the law. Well, you love the law because you haven't got anything better to do. And my first day off, so I had to start this myself. My first day off, I had to learn how to take a day off. I didn't take a day off in a decade, like 10 years. My first day off, and my wife still jokes about this, is I had to take my cell phone, give it to my wife, and we went to a movie theater in Tampa. We went to breakfast. Then we went to a movie theater that opened at like 9:45. We saw a movie, went to lunch, came back, and then I saw a 1:15 movie. And then my wife didn't want to go, it was one of these megaplex theaters. She wouldn't let me go from theater to theater. We had to go back outside the theater, buy a ticket, and go back in, and then saw another movie, then went to dinner. That was my first day off of no emails and phone calls to clients. And then I did it again the next day. So I did that Saturday and Sunday. And then I went in Monday and was a powerhouse. I got so much work done on Monday that I went, oh my God, there might be a secret to taking a couple of days off, because now I've rejuvenated, my energy level's up. What looked like to be mountain is now not. It's a little molehill. And I got myself completely wrapped around the axle on some cases because I get so stressed out and so tired. So the big thing that we try and teach lawyers, especially those that want to grow, is the trick is to flip everything on its head and focus on how to grow and cultivate a great life. And there's a skill to it because most of us don't know how to do it. We've lost our way. We've lost getting connected to the soul. We're lost getting connected to our heart. This is why depression in the legal industry is 3 times the national average. This is why the suicide rate is double than the national average. This is why the burnout rate is 55% among lawyers. We're miserable human beings. And if we don't protect ourselves and fight for ourselves, if we don't advocate for our own lives the way we advocate for our clients, then shame on us. We should go to war for ourselves. We should go to war for our families. We should advocate as hard for our own lives as we do for our clients. And most lawyers do not. If they would treat their own life with the same intensity and passion that they treat their best client's case, their lives would transform. But they don't do that. They sacrifice everything, including their lives, for the benefit of their clients and the benefit of their practices. And this is how come they're miserable human beings. Half of them are burned out. Half of them are considering that alcoholism is triple among our, I just did a podcast on alcoholism with a lawyer who's recovering alcoholic. Like, it's triple. These are coping mechanisms. These are not mechanisms of happy human beings. These are coping mechanisms that we're trying to do. We're highly trained, highly focused advocates and achievers, but we've lost our way of how to advocate for ourselves. So I want to thank you for letting me hang out with you today. Thanks for their great questions. Thanks for all that you do for the Atticus members. Thanks for being part of our summit. And thank you for generously letting me come on your podcast and share my story. And anytime you can squeeze me in, I would be delighted to come and hang out with you and talk to you about stuff. You're just a terrific guy. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Steve. Before I can let you go, a couple of things. I think that what you just said, this last speech, this last 2 minutes, very powerful stuff. I think that anyone who is hearing this and see themselves being in the shoes of that attorney who is part of the 55% who may be experiencing burnout, the high stress level, potentially depression, or any other host of issues that so many attorneys experience. How do they connect with one of your advisors and talk about, just ask one question, how do I build a great life?
Absolutely. So you can check us out on atticusadvantage.com. And then there's a little location on the website, like I want to talk to somebody, and just click here and we'll schedule a call with you. Or you can email me at steve.riley, R-I-L-E-Y, at Atticus Advantage, and email me directly, and we'll take care of you one way or the other. We'll make sure that you're taken care of. Our podcast is Great Practice, Great Life, and you can check that out. I'll give you a link for that in the show notes, but it's basically just me arguing with people just like you and I did today, saying, hey, look, what does it take to have a great life and great practice? So thank you.
Love it. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks.